Hello, podcast land. So glad to be back in the creator's seat. I apologize for my absence and the sort of sudden name change for the podcast. So let's address a couple things. All right, guys. So I changed the name of the podcast from A Perch of Birds to People Pursuing Greatness. It was always the tagline, right? Like the idea of the podcast was to interview people pursuing greatness. So I've wanted this thing to live for a long time, and I kind of took a step back in July. Had the last episode that was released. Took a long, hard look at what I wanted to do with the show, and try to make sure that it made sense with what I wanted to do. So here it is. And this seems to make more sense. Is just to drop the Perch of Birds part. It was hard to explain to everybody where I got it from. And it was my first, shot at starting a podcast. So still the same show, probably going to be not a lot different than what you guys have remember the show as. I just changed a few things, including the name. So welcome to my current and future vision of the show. And thank you all that are still listening and those that are just finding the show. I plan to start releasing every 2 weeks, starting from this one again. I know I've said that before. I know. But I'm going to start releasing again. I had a lot of stuff going on. And I wanted to make sure that I was free to start cracking off some good episodes for you guys. So I've got some cool stuff coming. The website for People Pursuing Greatness is not 100% done yet. You can still find the website at aperchofbirds.com, but that will be going away. And I'll announce that in an episode upcoming. Gosh. So, and there should be some really cool stuff. I got some more merch. The logo is actually really cool. It's not like confusing. Like, wait a minute, is his podcast about birds? I'm not sure. So, so on to today's guest, Dr. Mike Coltrin, an accomplished scientist, author, and avid explorer of the Sandia Mountains. He is so much of an avid explorer of those same mountains that he wrote the Sandia Mountain Hiking Guide, which is the de facto guide for hiking that big chunk of the Rockies here in the Albuquerque area. We talk about the mountains, Mike's achievements and adventures, and many stories in between. I had a lot of fun talking to such a smart and intuitive person as Mike is. Find his book at UNMPress.com and get outside to hike or do anything that challenges you while still being fun. Give us a shout out on social media. Leave us a review on iTunes, which is also going to be found as People Pursuing Greatness, and keep pursuing your own greatness. Oh, also, I did want to mention after the fact, once I was editing the episode, I did mention that Cedro Peak elevation was close to 10,000. It is not. I believe I looked at it. It was somewhere in the range of like 6,500, maybe in some change, somewhere in there. So, I did do a little research, and I do plan on actually doing that in the future. It's one thing I didn't do in the past, which was kind of post-editing something I may have said. So, yeah. So, again, Mike Coltrin, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. This guy is super smart and intelligent, and I hope he motivates you guys to do more, because this guy, I don't know where he found the time to do all the things that he did, but he's a true inspiration. I hope you guys enjoy it. Cheers. Interviews with people pursuing greatness. So we're here with Mike Coltrin, doctor, scientist, author, explorer. You got all these awesome titles, man. How are you doing today?
Well, doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Not only are you still doing great things, because you're still, doing what you've done for the last, 40 some odd years, but you have had some great accomplishments, and I wanted to kind of highlight those and then talk about some of the stuff that you've done, like writing your book, the Sandia Mountain Hiking Guide.
Right.
So you essentially wrote a book, just catch me if I'm wrong, that highlights 57 trails that are in the Sandia Mountains here in next to Albuquerque in New Mexico?
It's kind of hard to get an exact number. Some are longer than others, but yeah.
Okay.
This goes back, I wrote the first edition of the book in 2005, and It was overdue for an update, and that just came out almost a year ago exactly.
Okay. So the updated version is with more trails, or what did you...
I did quite a bit. A few new trails, probably 8 or 10 new trails. Some of the trails change over the years, like where you park. They rerouted a bit. A couple of them no longer exist, or actually, 2 or 3 I decided from the first edition, I just don't like that trail that much. Or really, what I say is, I'm not sure I want to send people to that trail. could be for safety reasons or just needed to be refreshed.
Sure. And so what do you find is the majority of the changes that you see? Like, is it the Forest Service that handles the trail changes, or is it open space?
The Forest Service okays changes like that and actually designs them. But they work with sometimes volunteer groups and sometimes Boy Scout groups, just other people to actually do the heavy lifting, because they're not in general staffed to actually creating the trails.
Sure. Okay. So they kind of like come up with the go ahead, like the permit, I'm guessing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Since there's a government involved, there's lots of permitting, and things like that actually take a long time.
Right.
That's actually, I wish that I had been able to write the book 3 or 4 years earlier than I did, but I had heard, there's a grapevine that I'm in on from the hiking. I had heard big changes are going to coming in this certain area. It's called north of what's called Armijo Trail. I thought, well, darn, I don't want to write a second edition of the book, and then like a year later, 15 new trails pop up.
Right.
But long story short, okay, the permitting, actually, they're still not there, so I finally just had to pull the trigger.
Put it out, yeah. Huh. So do you find that, and this is one of the questions I had written down because I was thinking to myself, I was like, well, you wrote this book. I'm sure there's other ones like this, but did you work hand in hand with any of those agencies to come up with this? Like, did you go to these guys and be like, hey, I'm putting out a book. Would you like to put anything in here or anything like that? Like, did they have any?
Not really. It was rather straightforward. So, my book was published by UNM Press,
right.
and UNM Press has published the hiking guide for the Sandia Mountains for over 30 years, dating back to like 1977 or so. So a person named Mike Hill wrote the Hiker's and Climbers Guide to the Sandias. Back then, there were 3 editions over many years, and it was actually, it had rock climbing as well as hiking.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
And so replaying all the tapes back to around 2003, an organization called the Friends of the Sandia Mountains, of which I'm a member, was working on a new book for UNM Press, a nature guide. It's called a field guide to the Sandias. And so it contains chapters on everything, geology, plants, animals, weather, history, and
almost like a backpacking.
It's something to take with you. So you see this butterfly. What is this? And you can
look it up.
Look it up. So UNM Press at the time also said, well, with this great new book, it is a wonderful book. We should have a new edition of a hiking guide to accompany it. The question was, and Mike Hill, who wrote the previous versions, had left town and was not available to write the book.
He was no longer a Burqueño.
Right. And so the question was, who should write this book? And I had been pretty active as a hiker ever since I moved to Albuquerque. But I also had an online website way back in the day where I had a diary of hiking every trail in the Sandias in a year.
Wow, okay.
And so somehow a reporter from the newspaper got wind of this and wrote an article about, this guy wrote this blog about hiking all the Sandias.
What year was this?
I did that about 2001.
Okay.
And so I had so people knew that I knew the mountain, and I knew how to GPS everything, all the trails and so on. I knew how to make maps. And so the suggestion came from the Friends of the Sandias, well, why don't you have Coltrin write it, because we at least know, he knows the mountain cold and has a lot of background.
Yeah, and you're capable. I mean, that's probably got to be a big piece.
And I had some credibility as a scientist. I wrote another book that a textbook, and so
anybody that can write a textbook, man, you could probably knock out.
I'm sort of used to understanding. Okay, this is a deadline. I need to finish a project.
Sure.
And so basically, I get an email saying, Mike, would you be interested in writing the next hiking guide for the Sandia Mountains?
Okay.
and I tell people all this all the time. That's not the usual way a first-time author gets a book.
Right. Where they reach out to you.
Yeah. And so I went down, talked to UNM Press, and they said, we sort of talked things over. They said, yeah, and can you give us, can you be done? And it was like 6 or 9 months or something. And
that's a pretty short amount of time to write a whole book.
It is, but they had a deadline of when the field guide was going to come out. They knew April 1st, that was when it's going to come out. What's April 1st? That's right when winter's over and people want to go out and
start doing their thing. Yeah, doing the summer antics.
And so that set the timing for writing the book. And so I set off, and I had kept my own hiking diary for like well over 20 years of notes that I'd made of all the trails in the mountains, and where you can find a certain overlook, or I would write a note. Okay, I saw this other trail off to the right. I wonder where that one goes. I should go explore that someday. Just kind of notes to myself. So I had a lot of raw material that's as well as this website really had listed or had talked about characteristics and what you see on all the trails.
Sure.
That was sort of ready to
like
go.
Here's that fork, and this is what you look for is maybe this Kairn, right? Right? Kairn. Did I say it wrong? See, and I always wondered if there's a specific way to say that. So for you guys listening, a Kairn is Kairn. I said it right.
A little pile of rocks.
A little pile of rocks. Yeah, and anybody can make one. And the idea is essentially to mark something. 9 times out of 10, it's to tell you, hey, you're going the right way. And on dirt trails, it's not as pertinent, but something like El Malpais, which is, all lava flows, that's all rock. So you need those because you can get lost if you don't see these little stacks of rocks to say, hey, you're going the right way. So how many trails are there total? Is there like a known number for that? I realize that there's a difference between official and not official.
There is a difference. Most of the trails in my book have an official trail number, and a few of them don't, and I make that distinction. And I only include pretty well established trails against where I want to send the public.
Sure. There's ones that you'll give your endorsement, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and safety turns out to be a really big consideration.
Yeah.
And a few minutes ago, you sort of asked me about changes in the book or second edition. I actually emphasize safety a whole lot more in the second edition. What I come to understand is if you send, a lot of people bought the book, okay.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's the guide.
A small fraction of those people get in trouble.
Okay.
And so even have to be rescued off the mountain. And
I see.
And so I don't want that to happen.
Sure. Do you get blowback from that? Like, do you have people
I have.
Really?
I've gotten, people, unfortunately, have gotten pulled off the mountain by search and rescue.
Oh, my gosh.
And what I find is that, and never want to do victim blaming, but not everybody reads things as closely as maybe I might have expected.
Right.
And so second edition...
no, it's right here.
Right.
I actually wrote what you're saying. I didn't write.
Right. And so I added bold print and actually I put a little header at the beginning of every hike about how far it is and elevation gain. And in about a quarter of the books, I have a whole paragraph called "Safety First." Okay, this is a warning. This is exactly.
There are bears. There are.
Well, it's mostly like this is a really long hike, and it gets very indistinct in places. And make sure you have a map and you know where you're going. And
so you emphasize like basic hiking stuff like water and food and
I have
packs
a
and
whole
stuff like
preparation.
That. Sure.
Of the
Okay.
book.
Well, so I I do some backpacking and I do a little bit of trail stuff, and even still with the trail stuff, I like to turn on my Garmin watch to be able to track how far I've gone comparatively to what I was told by either a guide or something you find on the internet. And I'll find that sometimes my watch is not even as accurate, and I'll be like, well, I'm already a half mile past where I thought I should be, and I get confused. So I can imagine, especially before GPSs were as cheap and as many of them as there are, that people were probably getting into some pickles trying to take on some challenging trails. Do you rate the trails like this one's harder than this? Okay,
I do. I have a what is it? Easy, moderate, difficult, and a few get most difficult. The ones I want to really make people sober under doing that trail.
Sure. What constitutes like one like that? Like scrambling up rocks and.
Very steep terrain, not well traveled. The potential for getting lost, and usually it's just hard to follow.
Sure.
And in a place where not many people are going, and so
if you got stuck,
you're way in the middle of nowhere.
Sure. So what do you as a contingency, do you tell people to bring a phone? I mean, I'm feeling like stuff like that's pretty straightforward.
I do have a whole set of pages about safety. I always say, definitely bring your phone, but you're not guaranteed always to have cell service.
Right.
So always have a plan B, or
right.
You can go to higher
sure.
spots on a ridge.
Make sure you bring a knife and a rifle in case you got to hunt down a bear and survive overnight. But there's not as much wildlife in the Sandias, I would think.
No, wildlife is hardly an issue.
I was going to say because it's more so well trekked in that area.
It's more of a thrill to see a bear than people say, "Aren't you scared of bears?" And I've hiked the Sandias for going on 40 years now.
Sure.
Seen a bear maybe a dozen times, every year or two. And almost always they run away as soon as you spot, or they spot you.
Right. Do the hey bear, and they just take off.
So if you see one, it's a thrill. People have asked me a lot, have you ever seen a mountain lion up there? And in all the years, just once.
Really?
And
was he stalking you?
No, just happened. I just happened to see him. I think what people say is, okay, Mike, you've only seen a mountain lion once. I can guarantee you've been seen by a mountain lion.
That's what they say, right?
More than that.
Well, there's been a spate of those. I don't know, and I always go back to this about media, that maybe we're just hearing about it because of how quick the news cycle is now. But it seems like you hear a lot of people, like in, I don't know, recently Colorado, where there was a guy that killed a mountain lion with his bare hands. Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
But I mean, I realize that's an exaggerated one-off story, but I don't know how many times, because I hike quite a bit, but not necessarily only in the Sandias, and we're always looking for a bear or a mountain lion. So same thing, it's like a thrill, if you see something like that. I've never seen one. I've had a buddy of mine that I've had on the podcast a few times. I want to say that he said he has seen one, but we like to try to take
bear or mountain lion.
Mountain lion. He's seen bears. Definitely seen bears. 9 times out of 10, they're running away from him, or they're just curious. And once they realize you're a human, they have no interest, because they're just, contrary to popular belief, they really don't. They don't come after you usually.
And in the book, I have a little paragraph about bears, about how they usually run away, but also the standard things about don't look them in the eye, which could be a sign of they interpret as aggression.
Sure.
And, that sort of thing. And you should be very careful should you get face to face with a mountain lion.
Right.
And I do know 1 or 2 stories, even from the Sandias.
I was going to say, man, that's a scenario you don't ever want to be in. Tell me one. I'd love to hear a story. Just because there's so few. I think a lot of people that don't hike, or they may have a fear of hiking, they think that, like you said, you're just going to run right into an animal. But it's so rare that when it does happen, I wouldn't even know what to do.
The story that I do know is this fellow. He's a real outdoorsman. He was a vet. That was his career. And he was in a tight turn in a canyon. And side slopes. It's
sure, and bottleneck sort of.
Yeah, a bottleneck, and there was a mountain lion, sort of starting to round the corner as he was, and it was like no place to go.
Oh man!
And the mountain lion was standing its ground, and eventually, I think he probably slowly backed off, and the mountain lion.
Stood his ground.
What
is what he's going to do? Yeah. Oh my gosh. But, I just couldn't imagine what goes through your mind, especially if you were that close, because I've seen some YouTube videos of people that get between, they have a tree between them and the cat, and at least you have that. But if I was that close and I had nothing, I wouldn't know what to think. So let me ask you this: do you? I realize that I don't want to speak out of school, but I would imagine that most of the trails are mandated to not bring weapons. Do you ever carry a firearm with you when you hike?
No, I don't have any firearms.
And I feel like the Sandias are probably.
But it's, I don't think there's any weapons carrying prohibition. I could be wrong about that, but if you could carry it in the city, I think that you could. There is definitely a ban on hunting.
Right. Okay.
Not always, but strictly regulated.
Right. Because the majority of the Sandians,
a lot of it's bow hunting being authorized. I'm not sure any firearms hunting is allowed.
Sure. Well, I mean, like when we go to like the Santa Fe mountain range, I usually carry a pistol with me when I'm backpacking, just because we'll get pretty far out there. It's not a straight shot back into Albuquerque if you get into trouble. Not to say every trail's like that on the Sandias, but it's just when you're that far out, I usually carry a pistol. But when I go to the Sandias, I don't, just because I feel like, I guess it is sort of a false sense of confidence that I could just
almost
run to the
everything
city.
you do or the vast majority of things you do in the Sandias are like you're an hour and a half away from your car
at most. Yeah,
and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
On the other hand, one thing nice about the Sandias, if you hike more than, let's say, 20-30 minutes from your car, you're probably not going to see anybody else the rest of your hike, which is very nice.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, like, when you go, you don't see a lot of these guys, but do you see a lot of snakes?
Oh, occasionally.
Do you? Okay.
I retired 2 years ago, so I am hiking more often.
Okay.
And so I am seeing a bit more snakes.
Sure, just from being out there.
Yeah. And almost all of them are bull snakes. And I saw, I almost stepped on a rattler about 2 years ago. It was coiled up the side. It was sleeping, fortunately, but basically the size of a Frisbee.
Oh, wow.
And I was just walking along. It's right in the middle of this trail. I could have stepped on him 2 more steps, and he never woke up. so
didn't actually rattle either, which is that's the thing.
So I'm standing there. I was actually with a friend, and next thing I did, I kept my eye on it. Next thing I did is pull out my phone. Okay, taking pictures, and he's not moving. I'm getting closer.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm extending my arms. It didn't move.
Oh, that's the scariest thing. But sure
I got
you
some
great pictures. Yeah. So we went to the Domingo Baca Trail 6 months ago, I want to say. And when we got up there, we were I've gone there a couple times before, and so we were up there, and this couple had gone ahead of us, and I was with my kids, and my youngest he was 4 at the time. And it's really not that bad of a hike, but he's hiked a little bit before, so I wanted to challenge him a little bit. So I'm taking him on this hike.
Oh.
We're in the back, we're hanging out, and then I've got my older son, my brother, and a friend of mine up in front. And, I start hearing some hooting and hollering, and I look up there, and I guess this couple that had passed us, they put a marker on a bush that said snake. And we're thinking, oh, how funny, like you just put this thing. But literally 2 feet in front of that, there was this big, beautiful rattler and just hanging out. And he was just kind of sprawled out across the trail. As soon as he saw us, he froze. But the particular spot we were in, we didn't have a way to go around him. So we ended up having to move him, and he was so calm the whole time. I was like, oh, I loved it. Once we set him down and he snapped that there was all of us, then he started to rattle a little bit, but it was well off trail. But, he let us kind of pick him up real nice with a stick and set him back down. But we got beautiful pictures. And I was laughing because like it's fun to debunk those misconceptions with my kids, because they're like rattlesnake, But I actually did a podcast with the gentleman that runs the Rattlesnake Museum here in town, and he had kind of put to bed a lot of the things that I had heard about aggressiveness, because that's like the wrong word to use with rattlesnakes. So
they're not out to get you.
They're not, yeah, and it was funny because they had I had a buddy of mine that did that podcast with us. He's that outdoor guy, my buddy Jared, and we had essentially gone through 1,000 different scenarios, and I could never find a story from the gentleman that actually runs a rattlesnake museum with live rattlesnakes where he'd ever been like chased or attacked or even bit, and I think he said he got tagged, but it was never like, oh, this thing got out to get me, like a black mamba or something like that. So that's kind of interesting. So you see a lot of snakes, you've seen some bears, you've seen some mountain lions, there's still did the ranchers are they allowed to have cows out there and stuff like that, or am I thinking
no.
of okay
No. It just they're not close enough. I mean, just that's not a thing.
Okay. Well, so
like I've hiked Santa Fe Baldy, and I think I'd go through some cows or something.
Yeah.
But it just depends on the land ownership.
Right. If it's
whatnot.
BLM comparatively to what's the other.
We got national forest here and a wilderness area.
What is Sandias? What is those
the sand? I don't know what percentage, but like 3/4 maybe of the Sandias are actually wilderness designated.
Okay.
So there are very specific rules. In fact, Congress has to say, okay, this is a protected wilderness.
Got you.
area.
So different than BLM land where they could rent it out or something
yeah.
to farmers. Okay.
And Sandias are just surrounded, by the communities and whatnot. So it's very different.
Right. So we see the Sandias from Albuquerque. We see the one side of it. Is there a lot that you don't that you can hike on the back side of it?
On the east side.
East side?
Oh, absolutely.
Is there really? Okay.
Absolutely. And yeah, I would have to say there's more trails on that side. I don't have an official count, or not off the top of my head, because it's so much drier and rockier on the Albuquerque side. There's maybe just fewer opportunities. But yeah, there's a lot of trails on the east side, and I do try to. I don't hike as much in the winter, but I still try to hike a few times every week, and I sort of go with the season.
Okay.
Right now. I'm mostly just doing things on the Albuquerque side, and not even going really high.
Sure.
But any day of the winter, I can go up Tramway Trail.
Okay.
It's just kind of deserty and no snow, and it's a wonderful hike. But on the other side, they're beautiful trails. They are cooler in the summer, significantly cooler, especially than the Albuquerque side.
Because you've got more trees?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, sure.
No, it's all trees.
Okay.
Basically, it's all trees.
So do you prefer that side? Like just for if you had a perfect hike you could take out there?
Yeah, I would say that.
Really? Okay, that's interesting.
And what I do like to do is, I know the trail system. It's really a whole trail system.
Okay.
And so I have any number of ways to combine trails.
To get from A to B, you'll know B, C, and D to get to E,
well,
really.
to make an interesting loop or something like that.
Sure. So you'll lay out 10 miles worth of hiking for the day, combining together certain... Okay, sure.
Sometimes it could be 5 or 6 trails, but I just know them and just...
Right. Mike, we're going to have to go out one of these days. We're going to have to do some loops, man. So what's your favorite one? I had asked you this when we had met at the event, and I was curious about that, and I know that I kind of caught you in a... So you thought about it. You're like, I don't know. I like a lot of them, But what if you had a favorite one? Of course, one
true confessions. People always ask me that, and I used to say one, and then I actually changed what I said to people.
So they don't go on it?
Yeah,
right.
No, because it was so hard. And
Okay.
So now those two things align. So actually, my favorite one is called Piedra Lisa South, and it is on the Albuquerque side. It's just north of the La Luz Trailhead.
Okay.
And then it heads straight north.
Okay.
And why I love that so much, and it's one of the 3 or 4 most popular trails with people.
Yeah.
It's easy to get to. It's a 2-mile hike to get up to the high point. And about 1,200 foot elevation gain. So it's a good workout.
That's a good workout.
It's very close. It's very convenient. But it has the most beautiful views of the big granite rock formations that you see from Albuquerque. You're just right underneath them, and they're just massive.
Sure.
And just off the and as you're hiking, you get different views, different perspectives
of the granite,
of the different rock formations.
Is this an area where people rock climb as well?
It is an access to a couple of the things. In fact, one of the most well-known routes is called the Knife Edge of the Shield. The Shield is the big granite wall that you see from Albuquerque, but in silhouette, you see it.
Yeah, it has that lovely feedback. It's not
in silhouette. You kind of see the left edge of it, and that's the knife edge of the shield. And literally, it's a kind of a knife edge, but it's 6 feet wide or something, and that's that is accessed from.
Okay. Do you see a lot of people out there on that trail? Is it a pretty busy trail?
Oh, I do.
Really?
In
Okay.
fact, I don't know why. I'm a nerd. That's why. I count. I sometimes count people, and I as how many people I saw on the hike, and I saw like 40 people over the course of 2 hours on this.
Wow, that's a
And
lot of people for
it is
just
a
being
lot
out.
of people.
That's crazy.
Of course, if you're on La Luz Trail, and you'd see a lot more than that. But that's
Right.
a lot.
Yeah.
But it's for the reasons I said. It's just a very popular trail.
That's awesome. So do you do any rock climbing at all?
Nope, never
No?
have.
Never have?
No.
I went one time, and it was the most frightening experience to go up the first time with the rope, and to you go. Have you ever done one of those rock walls that they have at like
Just a little.
Yeah, like those synthetic ones, not an actual right. So my buddy takes me to Hemes, and we go up to one of those main drags up there that people go and they do rock climbing on, and he did the lead line, took everything up, and I'm freaking out the whole time because to me it just looks dangerous, right? And just being a noob, and but he took me up, and then he gets me on the line, and he has me go up, and man, I was shaking the whole time until I fell. And once I fell and caught in the harness, and it just, you're just kind of like, you're all right. You can't, you can die, right? Of course, anything could happen. But in terms of safety, that was the best, scenario I could be in as somebody that's experienced. So that was new for me. So I've always been curious about the Sandias because I've only climbed.
People do rock climb. I just mentioned one of the most popular ones.
Sure.
Also, there's a rock formation right by the upper part of La Luz called the Thumb. Lots of people climb the Thumb. There's just climbing routes all over.
Sure.
I was going to say, I have scrambled up Cabazon.
Okay.
Have you been on Cabazon?
I have not.
And it's a I think they call that a class 4, where you're being very careful. You have to know every hand.
Okay.
Always being 3 points in contact.
Right. Right. But you're not getting to a point where you could ascend, like it's probably not sloped in a way that
it's not straight up. But no, you could do some harm.
Okay.
That's what a class 4 is. I think is if there is a risk of being.
Sure, because I think then it goes like 5.
5 is technical.
Okay, yeah, that's when you want ropes more likely than not. Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I've never, I've done very little scrambling or bouldering per se, but I've tried, in areas, and I just get too nervous and I have to bring myself back down. I always want to go with somebody that could tell me, hey, this is the way to go, or hey, stupid, don't do that. You know what I mean? Because I feel like I'm making the mistakes all the time.
A few times. Okay, I have been a long time geocacher up in the Sandias, and there are some geocaches that are in pretty hard places to get to, and places that I wouldn't go by myself, but I have been to half a dozen of those with somebody who really knew what they were doing.
Can you explain to people listening what geocaching is? Just real short.
Geocaching is basically it's like a treasure hunt that you use your GPS to go find the treasure. And so there's a website called geocaching.com, and for everyone that's hidden, there's a web page that gives a little description about what you'll see and so on, and then coordinates of the geocache. And
the GPS coordinates.
The GPS coordinates, and then off you go. And I had done it a lot, and they're all over town. They're all over everywhere. There's maybe 1,000 in the Sandias.
Yeah, I had a buddy that we did like 3 of them.
Yeah.
A lot of them were down south, but I know that there was so many of them, like you could literally spend years trying to find all these geocaches.
So anyway, I found a lot of geocaches, and but been to a few places I would never imagine that I would have gone for safety reasons by myself. But we got somebody to take us. And
is this the right way, man?
Yeah.
Am I doing too much here? Is this the wrong wall to climb? Yeah, that would make me nervous. Rock climbing is something that I want to do more of, but I have yet to. So we're talking things kind of off trail now. How much backpacking have you done? Like staying out and you don't do any backpacking?
No,
really?
I never.
Okay. Never? Or have you done?
No, basically never.
Okay, so in New Mexico, but then you had sent me some information on you talking about how you'd done some of the big hikes, and you'd done the Alps, Kilimanjaro, Machu Picchu. So do those kind of things, same kind of deal? You do like an out and back?
No. Okay, so the big hikes, basically, many of them you have to have a guide or a guide company take
Sure.
you. And so there are backpacking ways to go, and you'll find the college students and the 30-somethings staying in hostels along the way.
Okay.
Usually these are routes, like a 6 or 10 day routes.
Sure.
And
like somebody would plan to do this route as their trip, the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And no, there's well-established routes on these big hikes.
I got you.
And so hostels every
so often.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or there are other ways to go with hiking, or with companies where you end up staying in villages along the way or something.
Huh.
So you're sleeping in a bed and
A little bit more comfortably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is that the route that you would take
Yeah.
when you were going? Okay. See, and I've never gone even abroad, to be honest with you. So I would love to get your opinion on it. Is that more preferred, or is it just that you don't really like sleeping in a tent per se? No judgment, Mike.
I'm trying to think. It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
It's just, frankly, more comfortable and more expensive, and sort of,
Okay.
I'm sort of at the.
It's like a balance, depending on what you can do. Okay.
And if I haven't got experience like you do in actually doing backpacking for days and so on, it's just, okay, let's just go this other route. Easier logistics and whatnot.
I think food would be my biggest thing, because I'm eating so much dehydrated stuff, and you're just like, you have to be so thoughtful and plan for backpacking that I would love to just be like, and then we go to the hostel and we eat whatever they have, that would be amazing. So which one was your favorite out of all the ones that you've done abroad? I mean, did you do this just to do this? Like you went out and traveled, and this was the purpose of the travel?
That was the purpose.
Very cool.
I have some good friends, longtime colleagues at Sandia Labs that they're world travelers and including these big hikes. And the first one I did was Kilimanjaro, and I had sort of, you see these news articles about, okay, Jimmy Carter just climbed Kilimanjaro as a charity, fundraising thing, and this other person did it, and I thought, wow, that sounds like, and it's supposed to be very doable.
Sure.
It's very doable. It's very hard, but it's not technical.
Sure.
Anyway,
it's like well traversed. It's not like Everest. Well, I guess Everest is maybe a bad example, but I get what you're saying. It's not as challenging.
It is doable. So anyway, the final straw was I see some newspaper article that says, drawing a blank, Martha Stewart.
Oh, really?
Martha Stewart climbs Kilimanjaro, and I go, darn it. If she can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
we started making plans.
I don't know, man. She's kind of hardcore.
Yeah.
Like, what did she do? Like 5 years in federal penitentiary or something like that? So that's what kind of was the last straw, got you motivated to get out there.
And so we as scientists, we had a spreadsheet of all the pluses and minuses of different companies, and so we did the trip, and it was wonderful. And then after that, we got into this routine, and we went down to South America, Patagonia, and we've been to the Alps. You asked me what my favorite one was. I would probably say the Alps, because it was just so stunning. There's a 10-day route called the Tour de Mont Blanc. Okay. Mont Blanc is at the intersection, or the boundary of Italy, Switzerland, and France, and Mont Blanc is where they meet, and it's a 10-day hike around. So that's what it is, and like I said, you can go from village to village, and sort of a 10-mile per day sort of.
So there's like a lot of cultural mix, because you get to see different countries and the whole bit.
You get to see little villages along the way, and Italy's different than France and whatnot.
Was the food markedly different?
Food was I enjoyed the food, especially in Italy, for whatever reason.
Of course.
Yeah.
I would hope.
Yeah. But back to the Alps, it's sort of like you go around a corner, or you go over a pass, and you just stop. You go, oh my word. I mean,
Just stunning.
Never seen anything like this.
That's awesome.
And
was there did you, I mean, I would fill up. I always take like a giant camera with me, and I don't mean to be that guy, but even if I go backpacking, I will carry that extra weight. Do you take a lot of pictures and
I do take a lot of pictures, and things evolve, and now I just take my iPhone. I take as good a picture with an iPhone as I can with a camera.
Sure.
And just carry. I can pull it out of my pocket, and I do this on the Sandias all the time. Pull it out of my pocket and take the picture.
Yeah. Well, you can do the cool stuff. I love the photospheres. You do the 3D photospheres, and you can get into some places. I was in San Lorenzo Canyon. And we were there, and I had my kids hide in a dark little corner there, and I did a whole 3D of being in between those canyons. The nice little tight slot canyons. Well, they're not even slot canyons there, but the one area that was. And it was just so cool. I thought the same thing. I was like, I can't believe that all of this is in my cell phone. I get from my cell phone carrier, where even 5 years ago, this wasn't, I don't know, 5 years is maybe a little short, but even 10 years ago, it wasn't an option to have such quality. Because like you said, an iPhone, man, you can take National Geographic quality pictures. So then did you do any any tent stuff on that trip, or that was all hostel type stuff?
Not in the Alps. Kilimanjaro was all tent.
Wow, okay.
It gets cold up there.
Really?
Yeah, like below zero. Some of the nights. My story about Kilimanjaro is it's 19,340 feet.
Is it
I think
really?
It is. And we took a route that was it's less traveled and is more difficult. But what I'm getting is we slept at the top, which not very many people do. We slept in quotes at about 18,500 feet. It's in quotes because you can't sleep.
Yeah, because how cold it is?
No, just your body is just it just doesn't know what's going on. You just don't sleep, and you hardly have any appetite at all.
Sure, because you went from. I'm sure you climbed up from.
We started about 12,000 feet.
My God, that's like as high as our highest mountain in New Mexico, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but a lot. Pity the people from coastal areas that we have a 6,000 foot advantage coming from.
We have a head start.
From New Mexico.
Well, we did Lake Stewart and Kairn last year. A couple buddies of mine. I don't know if you're familiar with that area, but it's like a 6 mile jaunt up to like 10,000 feet, which is where Stewart's at, and then within a 2 mile shot, you climb up to 12,007. And and we made base at Lake Stewart, slept a couple nights, fished, did the whole bit, and then we're like, well, let's try for Kairn, even with super light packs, right? Because you leave your base camp. So I wasn't carrying a full load and just enough food to get up there and water to get back. I couldn't believe how much issue I had acclimatizing once we started to get up near 12,000, and it was like my pack was too tight. Did you experience any of that kind of stuff when you were up there?
Well, certainly breathing was very hard. And what I learned is on that trip is walk slow. I mean, they make you walk slow.
Yeah.
It's just like the things you see on the news clips on Everest, a step every 3 seconds.
People kind of zombieing along.
I don't know. Just going really slow.
Sure.
But now I do that as a rule, even in the Sandias. And so I'm not a runner. I hurt my knee years ago, and so I'm not a runner. So I'm not in the anaerobic condition. And so I don't really like, the heart's just pounding away.
Yeah.
So I never get out of breath on anything steep in the Sandias.
Sure.
I just go so slowly that I can keep on going forever.
But that means you would do well in a God forbid, a long-term situation, because you're not roasting all the calories in your body. You're not stressing yourself. Because I have a bad habit of where I like to get into that anaerobic, and my friends will make fun of me because I'll hike ahead of them. And, they're like, oh, we like hiking by ourselves, because I'll kind of leave them in the dust, But I'm the guy that has to eat, my shirt's covered in sweat, and I'm, so I can totally relate that I definitely go too fast. It's something I need to pull back. So you were safe, you were going slow, so you feel like the acclimatization was a little easier on you?
Yes, and we took the slow route. The bulk of the people going up Kilimanjaro do it in, I think it's 4 days, and they are in severe risk of altitude sickness.
Wow!
And a very large fraction don't make it. We summited on our 8th day. we went the long way with, an intentional day or two of rest.
Double the amount of time to get up there. Sure. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I just remember I wasn't, being that we had the time, like you said, I mean, it was only 12,007, but like to get to that height, it was really weird because it was almost like you couldn't eat enough food. It was like my body was just in overdrive, like it needed to pull back. We sat down on the side of the trail and ate, and it was only 2 miles to go from base camp up to this next lake. We couldn't make it there. We had to sit down and eat.
That's a significant elevation.
Yeah.
Even compared to, you can feel the difference between 10,000 feet here and 12 and a half somewhere else.
Sure. The highest spot on the Sandias is like 10 and some change, 10.6. Okay. So I live, down near the Manzanos at the base of, and we go to the Manzano Peak, which is just, I think, below the Sandia Peak. But it's, you basically can drive almost up to the top. You know what I mean? I think the furthest you do, there's like a 6 mile trail to get from the backside up to the peak. So you kind of get to cheat, up there quite a ways. So the La Luz goes from the bottom. That's like our most popular trail, right? On the Sandias?
It goes from I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, on the order of 6,500 to 10,500.
Wow. So that's like
just about 4,000.
In 9 miles, right? Isn't that about how long that trail is?
A little less than that. 7 and 3/4.
Wow.
Like that.
So I'm hoping to get into the lottery for the La Luz run this next year.
I did that twice.
Did you really?
Back in the day when I was a runner. Yeah.
How did you fare?
I finished.
No,
I did just fine.
Okay.
I got in really good shape training for that. Well, I was in, maybe not specifically training for that, just as a runner, I was in good shape at that time.
Sure.
And had the way I got in good shape back then is actually I'd run a marathon and I didn't do well.
Marathons are tough, man.
I could barely finish, and I got in the habit of running home from Sandia Labs with a bunch of other folks who were quite a bit older than me.
Wow.
Let's say I was 25 and they were 45-ish. Now that's way younger than I am now, but running with the older guys, they were tough as nails, and so that just keeping up with them, day after
that's
day.
An incentive. You're like, Bob's not gonna outrun me. Nah, it ain't gonna happen.
But just keeping up with them, I got really good shape, and so I did La Luz twice.
So that ended up being your one of your major races. We didn't talk about running as much. I know that was a long time ago. But
I would dabble in a 10K or something.
Okay, so that's more your focus. I'm training right now for the Cedro Peak, the Cedro Peak. I don't want to speak out of school. I guess it's the trail run that's up there, but it's it's a 50K. So it's like 31 miles, something like that.
I know such a thing exists. I don't know the details.
I've never done it. I've never even been to the trail. But I'm training to essentially go to the race, you know what I mean? And be able to race for it. It's supposed to be it's like close to 10,000 feet, I want to say. It might be.
So how long is it?
So a 50K would be 31 miles. Okay. And it would be, it's the most I've ever done. I've done one marathon, and it thoroughly kicked my ass. I won't lie to you. So I used to run exclusively in the toe shoes. And people that are listening, I tell the story too many times, but I essentially tried to do a marathon in toe shoes, and I did the Duke City, which is all asphalt, and it destroyed me. And so I felt the same way. I could barely finish it. Like I was just walking past the thing. I think I did a 4 hours 30 minutes, which is slow for my age range, to be honest, because there's guys breezing by me that were twice my age, and I was like, all right, man, show off. They're going by.
That's about how long it took me for my first one. I only did it one more, and I did it in 3:14.
Wow,
and
that's really fast,
though.
though.
That was my goal.
Wow, yeah. So you must have been doing it. I'm hoping to do another marathon after this one and actually get a time I could be more proud of, for sure. Because I felt like I had no excuse except for maybe just under training, and that was really what my issue was.
Makes a difference.
It really does. Yeah, a lot of people are like, well, what do you do to get ready for this stuff? What's your nutrition? I'm like, you really just need to run, and I didn't do enough of that. I just didn't run enough. So I think I'd done 18 miles in training at most, and then I just jumped and did 26 in a day, and I about died, I think. Came back to life, and here I am, So running was a short amount of time. You hurt your knee, and then
I started in grad school. This is way back in the mid-'70s when running just became a thing.
Yeah, that's when ultras kind of started to become a thing, right?
And so I moved to Albuquerque, continued running, and then I hurt my knee actually probably in that second marathon.
Really?
I really, that was it.
Did you fall or something?
I don't know meniscus just.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So anyway, that was that. And that was like in the mid 80s or so. And that was that. And so I had been a trail runner. That's moving to Albuquerque. I was still a runner, so I became a trail runner in the Sandias, and so that's how I first started learning all these trails and had Mike Hill's book and all. You
were learning them at a clip. It wasn't that slow kind of saunter you do now, huh? So what was your opinion? I didn't know how to craft this question without putting a negative spin on Albuquerque, and I don't want to. But with some of the stuff that gets in the news about crime and stuff like that, you were talking about safety. I was curious. Did you ever think about when you're putting in the book like areas that would be considered less? What's the word? Like they're less populated, therefore they're safer. I mean, is crime even a thing, kind of in those trails? I've heard of people kind of getting mugged or assaulted.
I haven't.
You have? Okay, really?
Never even occurred to me.
Okay.
I always say you shouldn't hike alone, and for safety reasons.
Sure.
And they always say 3 is the magic number. In case somebody gets hurt, one person can stay with the person,
or you can kick that guy's leg so the bear gets him when you run away.
But no, I haven't. And I hate to say it, if I were a woman and maybe a more slight build, you might have some trepidation.
Be more of a target, and I guess that's a question I'm kind of asking is, did you put anything like that in your book to say, hey, maybe this, you should always be hiking with another person, or?
I absolutely say that, but for the reason I just said.
Sure. Well, that's my,
and also, just not getting lost. There's all sorts of good reasons to hike with another person.
Yeah,
that's just the standard advice.
Right. Well, and I think so. I had a gentleman on the podcast that he works for and he's going to hate me for not remembering the exact name of it, but it's one of the search and rescue teams here. And he had talked about how that's usually the people that would get into more predicaments is the people that aren't reading a book, or at least getting some sort of semblance of an idea of what you should do as a contingency if you were to get into a situation where you're lost or something like that.
A lot of the people don't really know where they are, even when they start. Sort of like there's this standard thing. Not every trail is the La Luz, and people get lost, and they say they think they're on La Luz, and they weren't even on La Luz.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to find them.
Well, when you get into the mountains, I feel like looking at Albuquerque, it's a lot different than when you're, as you typically are, in Albuquerque looking at the mountains, because you can point at a canyon and say, that's X, Y, Z, but when you're back inside of the mountains, sometimes you're looking at a weird angle on Albuquerque, and, it looks like you could just take a beeline back to Albuquerque, but it could be, a treacherous or much longer trail to get back. So what? So in the in doing this is going to be the final iteration. This one that you have of the book. Are you planning on adding any more to it?
That's an interesting question. So when I wrote the first edition, I had no clue about what this was all about. So I'm asking all these questions to the publisher. How many? First thing I said, well, how many copies does a book like this sell?
Yeah.
I go, they snapped their fingers. 10,000.
Really?
Whoa. Okay. And then I said, how long before it gets out of date and you have to write a new one? They go, snap, 10 years.
Huh.
The reason they knew all the answers so quickly is because they'd been publishing the similar book the last 30 years.
Right.
So they knew the market.
So every 10 years they needed to come and wrap it around again. So has it sold?
And so it did end up selling, the first edition, around 15,000.
Wow.
It did go, and so, yeah. And so it was time for a new edition. Now, who knows? And so I'm 66 right now. In 10 years, I'll be 76. Who knows where I'm interested in.
You're going to be out there, Mike. Come on, man. You know you can't get away from those trails.
But I also kind of feel like, let me get, before I say that, there's actually no competitor to this book because it's nor had been for 30 years, just because it's so exhaustive. There's just no point in reproducing. All that.
You've done that research, and the trails aren't really moving. They may be changing ever so slightly, but
so it's explained well enough. Anyway, so I sort of feel like, okay, I will have a 20-year run with the hiking book.
Right.
Somebody else can write the next one that have a different spin.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I feel like also a lot of things are going digital. I mean, is that
there is an electronic version
of the
book. I may be the only. I don't know how many people, how much that has sold. But I've got one on my phone right now. I think it's beautiful, and I refer to it sometimes just thinking, okay, I've got my GPS. Now, what did I call this GPS point? Just to kind of
cross-reference
and look things up.
Well, I remember, like, you were talking about geocaching a long time ago. We had basic Garmin's before phones were as. I mean, you could do it. Like, granted, you've had GPS and phones for like the last 15 years, maybe even 20 years, but. It wasn't as now it's so much easier. You can just pull up an app and you know where you're at. But I think it'd be cool to have, the digital version of the book as well.
I do have that. And a lot of people ask me, do I use an app or do I know one I could recommend? And I say, more power to you with the apps. But it's just, I've been doing the GPS. Everybody gets their own system as to what's easy to use. I'm used to using the GPS. I have no real reason to switch.
Yeah.
But I know they're available, and more power to you.
Yeah. Well, they usually don't lose cell service. Yep. Where you would with a phone, because an actual GPS, as long as you can see the sky, you're usually in good shape, So if we were to get the digital version, that's also at UNMPress.com?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so for you guys listening.
The book's, it's also on Amazon.
Okay.
I ordered the digital version on Amazon. I'm not sure
if they have it on both.
They probably do. I just didn't easily find it. I don't know. I just bought it.
Sure.
From Amazon.
Okay. So for you guys listening, if you guys want to check out the book, it's Sandia Mountain Hiking Guide, which you can get at UNMPress.com or apparently on Amazon.
And a lot of the, I do believe it's at REI and a lot of the bookstores around town. And I definitely support the local bookstores as well as UNM Press.
Yeah, and I mean, that's legit that you kind of are the de facto go-to for this type of guide. That's cool. I'm sure you're very proud of that. I would be.
And I'm happy with it.
Right. Sure. So that's not the only book you've written, and I kind of wanted to segue into just some of the more, higher level stuff that you've done. So you also have written another book, but I wanted to ask how that worked out. So you've written a textbook, and so you have your PhD in physical chemistry, right? You got that in 92, and then
I got my PhD in 79.
In 79, yeah. What happened in 92? Why do I have that written down?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know.
I must have been. So I'm trying to be cool and get ahead of you with homework, and look at me messing up my dates here. So you got it. Okay. So you got your PhD in physical chemistry, though, for sure.
Yes. And then I came to Sandia Labs, and I worked closely with experimental people my whole career at Sandia, although I am a modeling and simulation person, a big computer guy.
Okay.
And I was hired to do a certain job to make a computer model to explain how you grow this certain material. Anyway, it involved, and it's a complete stretch for me. And I fortunately teamed up with very, very capable guy, Robert Key from Sandia, who's now a professor at Colorado School of Mines. And he was a mechanical engineer and like a numerical mathematician. So it was just
That's a brain on a brain, I think, is what
it was a very sweet collaboration because I was adding chemistry on top of all this complicated stuff. So fast forward, we ended up writing. He already had a tremendously successful suite of software, and I ended up writing some software about chemistry that fit right on top of that.
Wow!
And the umbrella term for this software is called ChemCon, for chemical kinetics, and it's hard to know. It's sort of like on the order of 10,000 people around the world might be using Chemkin.
Sure.
It became commercial.
But this is mostly scientific. This isn't a consumer level kind of thing typically. I mean, I guess I could buy it.
No, companies use it.
Okay,
it's
sure.
very expensive. It's like to design car engines and stuff.
Right, okay.
So anyway, very successful software. There had never been, and there had been user manuals, but sort of not a comprehensive in one place, all the equations and all the background and all the development related to Chemkin. And so we ended up writing this book called Chemically Reacting Flow, that's the umbrella for what we do. And has all the equations.
Yeah, and Mike's actually got the book here. It's like a legit
it's like
textbook,
900
man.
pages
Can I take a look at it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's legit. This is something you'd get in college, right? Did they use
it's
this
like
in
a
college?
graduate level textbook.
So you guys both wrote on this, and then so this is one of those scenarios again. Like, are you approached by the company, or did you guys come up with the idea and then approach them? How do you write a textbook?
We knew that this book ought to be written. So you ask various publishers, would you write a little application or something? And this is published by Wiley, which is a big publisher in textbooks, and they said sure.
That's cool.
And so this is the second edition of that book as well.
Wow. And you had a hand in the second edition, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And so the first edition of this textbook came out, I think, in 2002. And right as I was retiring, we were finishing up the second edition of the textbook. And so when I walked out the door at Sandia, March 1st of 17, I went right to work on finishing up.
Of course you did.
Up the second edition of the textbook.
Yeah.
And then I got to work on second edition of the hiking book.
So let me ask you this, because I know that what you do, like you'd said, is extremely complicated. Could you give me an example of something that I would do with this science? Like if I was like you said, a company trying to get from A to D, what's an example of something you do with this?
What you want to do in the field I'm in is build a machine, a reactor, to grow a certain material.
Okay.
That involves gases coming in. It's high temperature, reactions occur, and you grow the material if you've done it just right. And so there's a combination of what gases should I put in, how fast should they go, what difference does the temperature make,
Semiconductor thin films. So what do these do? I'm just, and I understand that this is probably way above what I can understand.
Computer chips.
Ballpark. Okay.
Computer chips.
Okay.
And that's where we started. Is I was hired. Let's put some science into the making of silicon computer chips.
Wow. Okay.
And I worked with experimentalists who did measured things, and then it used the software to kind of interpret experiments. And then that my whole career was semiconductor materials growth. And as years go by, different materials come into importance. I did diamonds for a few years. There was a process of growing diamonds. And for the last 15 years or so, I've been working on semiconductors that can emit light, which is an LED.
Okay. And
that was really the science behind, the understanding behind that was very difficult, and so for 15 years I've been working on the growth of those type of materials.
Sure, and you've got, and apparently you're successful because you have like 3 patents that have your name.
I do have 3 patents. They're not related to that, but.
Oh, okay. Is there anything you don't do? No, well, I guess my question would be then, naturally, is anything in the real world today using some stuff that you've worked on? I mean, it would sound like it, because if you improve the technology.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So like my cousins and everybody, they say they're just sure that Mike actually invented the LED, but he's just so modest, But that's not the case. What the case is, 1,000 people, maybe 5,000 people are working on things like this, and so
it's a team effort to essentially get what we have today.
You do your little. It all fits together. You write papers about how this aspect of the process works, and that sort of thing.
That's really cool. So what I mean, and not to get way into the weeds, but so I saw that you're a native of Oklahoma. That's where you hailed from.
I grew up in Bartlesville, Oklahoma.
Okay.
I tell people it's a very similar town to Los Alamos. What that means is it was about the same size, 50 miles from a big town, which in Oklahoma was Tulsa. It's the home of Phillips Petroleum Company, the headquarters, which is a pretty big corporation. They had their R&D center there, so very highly educated population.
Sure.
And so that's how I grew up, and got some scholarships from Phillips Petroleum Company that enabled me to go to college and so on. So it was.
So did you have like an interest in chemistry right out of the gate? I mean, was that kind of
one of my things I tell people a lot, especially younger people, is it's never too late. I was a rather mediocre student in growing up until my senior year. I happened to take a chemistry course, and it changed my life. It was just like I was never just engaged. I think I was in a fog, just
Yeah.
But
it's like you're calling.
The light went off.
Yeah.
And so that was my senior year. I decided I would be a chemistry major, and did that, and just loved it. And I was in such a fog my junior year. My math teacher had me convinced that was the last math course I was ever going to take. That was it, Mike. But it turns out, if you have the right teacher, I was actually pretty good in math.
Well, and if you're engaged in it, like I feel like chemistry to me, I remember taking one chemistry class, and I kind of hit a wall because I felt like I wasn't interested in it. You know what I mean? And I feel like if I was to, I work in IT, and I feel like when I kind of hit that spot, same thing. Light came on, and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting," And sometimes I'll try to explain to people in the same thing. I'm like, "Yeah," and then I did this, and I did that, and then I'm playing with this, and I'm researching that, and they're just like, they can't engage with it, and and I get it. Like it's kind of like once you found your calling, because where else do you put your efforts but places that you want it to be? So the chemistry math made sense. Where other stuff like algebra. Well, I guess you use algebra in chemistry. I mean, there was a place to use this math.
What I do is actually called, at least my graduate school training, was theoretical chemistry. I mean, that's a thing.
God,
I mean, that's
theoretical chemistry. Yeah. Oh, I couldn't imagine what that.
And
those tests look like.
It's all math, and what physical chemistry means is that you are using physics and the laws of physics to explain chemical phenomenon. So laws of thermodynamics and that sort of thing. And that was really intrigued me. And
you've been in it so long. Have you seen an evolution of the science? Have you seen it become bigger and badder, or like?
Oh, it's more and more computational. I would say making of pharmaceuticals is a perfect example. It's so much cheaper to these guys are running huge programs to do screenings for different types of chemical elements on a protein and whatnot to design drugs.
So the computer is a lot of the focus of it now, of the science.
Yeah.
Sure. Where in the 70s, I'm sure you were doing most of it on paper I mean, you had computers, but
the supercomputers were just coming online, and actually University of Illinois had probably the best computing facilities in the country.
Huh, okay.
And it's probably no coincidence, but Sandia Labs at the time was always in the top 2 or 3 in the world of supercomputers. That was just a niche.
Sure.
And
that's kind of their shtick, so though. They like to be cutting edge.
And so I certainly benefited from all that, as I had really good resources so I could solve problems that other people weren't solving.
And we keep talking about Sandia Labs, and for you guys listening, just to kind of explain in short, it's one of the probably one of the most comprehensive, but also one of the best science laboratories in the world. It's one of two in the U.S. that essentially does what they do. So this would be the place for somebody like you to go, because this is like it's like a playground. Am I right? I mean,
it definitely was when I hired on.
Because they let you guys do kind of what you need to, what you want to do, right? I mean, as long as it's within the realm of...
That's not so much true anymore.
Okay.
Back in the day, the joke, or what they said is, the part of Sandia I worked in was the basic research part, is you can work on almost anything except biology. We just didn't do that.
Really? I guess, yeah okay.
And but I was asked specifically to work on this certain type of problem. Now, how I pulled it off, and the exact route that I chose and the experimental guys chose, we had freedom over that. But so it was really like, okay, there's a lot of good resources to solve problems.
Right, to utilize to be able to get to where you want to do, or where you want to be when it comes to the end of the problem. That's really cool. So I feel like that must have lent to your ability on your own to do big projects, including writing textbooks, which is, I mean, something that would be easy compared to, I'm sure, some of the stuff you did at Sandia. But I feel like at that high level that you were being asked to go to for your 9 to 5, it was probably easy to write a book.
Well, it's part of the job.
Okay.
It's just part of the job.
Lots of documentation.
You're exactly where I was. It was similar to academia, in that we're expected to publish journal papers.
Right.
And so that's actually is the product of science. Is the journal paper or a book.
Yeah, because you co-authored, 90 scientific articles, somewhere in that range?
Somewhere around, I don't know.
Wow, that is a lot of writing, man.
but yeah, and so, anyway, the book was a challenge, but the chemically reacting flow book, my colleague, Bob Keep, wrote probably 2/3 of it. I wrote on the order of 1/3 of it.
Sure. I don't want you to minimize things, man. This is something not very many people can do. You said it yourself, like something like, 10,000 people in the world?
And he's now a professor at Colorado School of Mines, and so he teaches out of this textbook.
Sure. And just to ask the question, how come you don't teach? Is that not something that... I mean, I know college kids these days,
I applied to a fair number of college positions. I never got one. I think I would have enjoyed that, and
at one point, but not necessarily now.
No, not now.
No, you like being retired?
They're done now.
Yeah. So I guess one of the things that I wanted to ask, because we've kind of talked about how you've achieved a lot, even if it seems like a natural extension of your curiosity and your interests. What would you say has been how should I put this? What do you do to keep yourself on the up and up, health-wise, habits-wise? Do you have anything? Do you get up at 4 a.m. and do yoga? Do you what's the story? Do you do anything like that? Kind of keep yourself.
I'm not very diverse in what I do. Okay, so I hike a lot.
Sure. I mean, that's a lot of exercise in itself.
Yeah, and that's a sweet spot for me. I don't have an unhealthy diet, but I don't do anything in particular. I think I'm just blessed with a good health right now. Always have been. Haven't had anything major go on other than like the knee problems or whatnot.
But you don't ascribe to any specific diets or anything like that?
Definitely not.
Sure. I'm always curious, like a high output person, you know what I mean? Is there something you're doing to kind of feed that flame? That I wouldn't necessarily do.
I think what feeds me is I love challenges, I guess. I do. And I really love problem solving. And it's almost no matter what the problem is, I just get a satisfaction, and I don't quit. That is definitely true.
Yeah.
There's when you're doing things like some of this software, this is like maybe a 2 or 3 year undertaking. You're just banging away.
Yeah.
I mean, it's long term.
Sure.
And that's the amount of time it takes to solve any problem that's worth solving.
Sure. I like how you put that.
And so I'm just used to that, and it's great when it's great when it's done. And you said you must be proud of your hiking book, and I said I'm happy with it, and that's what I feel is when I'm done. It's just a very satisfying to have done that. It's like I did it.
Yeah. Well, and then you contributed to the world in a way that is, it's a different branch than what you did for a living.
Well, I was very lucky that I told the story just, that fell into my lap. And I did, and I wasn't sure. Well, I was pretty sure I could do it. It's just a matter of, how it was going to turn out,
Sure.
But I was.
Yeah. Well, it came out good, man. I mean, I feel like that's like you said, that's the de facto book for people to go to for the Sandia hike. So you recommended Piedra Lisa, did I say it right?
Piedra Lisa South.
Okay.
There's another north part that starts up by Placitas, and it meets where the north and the south meet.
Okay.
Wondering about other great hikes? Yeah.
I mean, that's what I was going to say. I feel like this would be a good time to kind of let some people know of some highly rated from the man himself,
You can obviously drive all the way to the top of the Crest Highway. There's the Crest House is up there. There's very nice hiking opportunities going straight north from that parking lot on the North Crest Trail. You can go a long ways, 6 or 8 miles, and come back. And one of the trails that I really have a warning about is it gets so remote out there, but you're 15 miles from where a million people live, and you're not going to see anybody there. I mean, just completely by yourself, and beautiful views. Or you can go south from where I said. You can ride the tram up and take just all sorts of trails that you're not necessarily even going uphill because you're near the crest line, and
Sure.
so you can do.
It's kind of even,
It's kind of even, yeah.
Sure.
And it's a tree covered. A very popular trail is also called Tree Spring Trail. That's similar in mileage and stuff. It's about 2 miles up and about 1,000 feet elevation gain, similar to Piedra Lisa. It's a very popular trail. So much.
Is there a spring there? No, but it's called Okay.
It was named Tree
Maybe
Spring.
at one point.
It was named after a spring. It's not exactly at the trailhead.
Sure. Sure. Okay.
The legend has that there was a spring coming up from a stump or something. So
Tree spring. Okay.
And one of the things I did in the hiking book is I try to tell a backstory of every backstory that I know.
Yeah,
about
that's cool,
name origins and so on. And that's just a wonderful. Tree Spring's a wonderful trail because when you get to the top, now you're at the crest, the ridge line, and you have very nice views back over Albuquerque and the Rio Grande Valley. So very nice destination point and a place where people have lunch up there.
Good pictures.
Okay pictures. It's okay pictures.
Sure.
Now the great spot for pictures is called Del Agua Overlook, and you can get there from going on the North Crest Trail from that parking lot at the top of the road. It's about 1.8 miles, or you can get there from actually 2 or 3 other routes. It's an overlook. Arguably the best view in the whole Sandias, especially it's the view for aspens in the fall. It's incredible.
For the color changes.
Yeah,
sure.
It's incredible.
Wow.
And it's really fun if you walk up in a certain way. You're in the tree line, you come over around a corner or something, and you see it all at once. It's like you're just shaking your head.
Like
You're stopping your tracks.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
And every year I hike it. I have to get it at its peak, and you never know when that is. So I go like once a week.
To be able to see it.
I start early and
You can get like the phases as it
I
changes.
do that as well. And
That's awesome.
And so when you're that high up, there are aspens. That's a good part of it's all golden colored. So.
Wow, I love when you find those patches of aspens because they're not. Are they native? I guess it's the wrong word to use because really a lot of the trees here are not necessarily native. But
I'm sure it's native, and as it is in other spots in New Mexico, they depend on elevation and rainfall.
Sure.
That just whether they're growing or not.
Well, every time you see them too, like they'll just kind of pop out, and it's like in a nice little grove or a wood of them, and it's so stark to the.
But they're all
trees.
connected underground.
Really?
Yeah. There's a root system.
Huh.
Maybe
You're saying to the aspens?
Yeah, the aspens. Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
And, there's this whole thing. I'm no expert on the trees and whatnot.
I don't know, man. You did write a book, Mike. Come on.
They do pop up after fires. It's just part of the deal.
Okay.
I mean, that's just part of the health of the ecosystem.
Sure.
They're waiting to go, and they probably add back nutrients and do their thing.
Sure. Well, we haven't had one like they do, or they have had in other parts of the states on the Sandias. I don't think there hasn't been like a big
huge
fire.
ones like that, and the people responsible for the Sandias, the Forest Service and whatnot, are just very. I don't want to say concerned. They know it would be a really big deal for a huge fire to happen.
Yeah.
But because there's the radio towers up there, like
the restaurant at the top, the tram.
But then also the communities go right at the edge of the wilderness, so it's just a big deal. But so they don't want forest fires, but it's forest fires are also natural, and so the ecosystem can get a little bit out of whack if there hasn't been one.
Right.
That sort of.
Well, that's like if you go down if you go to the river, I feel like it's kind of a drawback that they don't allow people to pull firewood. That's dead trees or fires are, they do happen, and it is just as dangerous as it would be anywhere else you have humans near these forested areas. But like you said, it's natural. And I feel like sometimes, like the river itself, you try to hike through the river just through the forest that's there. It's almost impossible because there's so much undergrowth and brush. And it's just because there's never been a thing to go clean out all of that since the years of buildup. And it's, you can't have fires out there. I think you can probably have a fire for like cooking something, but I don't even know if that's
in the Sandias.
Well, at this point, I'm talking about the bosque, but I know in the Sandias you can if you're allowed, right? Like at the certain times of the year.
Right, unless there's a prohibition, yes.
Okay, but in the bosque farm, I almost said bosque farm. In the bosque around the river where you have that wooded area, that it's so hard to hike unless you go on a specific trail. You know what I mean? Down in that area, and I'm always thinking to myself, like one good fire would just clean all this up because there's just so much growth, So I think with the fires too, that's something that would be devastating because of how many people use the Sandias every day to exercise and to, not even just a hike, but just a mountain bike and those lower trails that are more accessible near tramway.
Yeah, so there's been 2 or 3 moderate-sized fires in the last 15, 20 years up there. Everybody's really freaked out or worried, and including myself. Just don't want to see that
happen.
It's life changing in terms of our lifespan.
Right.
We won't see it like it was again.
Right. It doesn't just come back.
Yeah, it doesn't just come back.
Do you feel like the people have a good stewardship of the Sandias?
Yeah, I'll give a qualified yes. Many people just truly loved the Sandias.
Yeah.
And I think those are the people that, really are shepherds of, trying to clean things up and so on.
Sure. The few times I've been out there, it's been, I feel like just been very clean. It's very frequented. And like I said, the Manzanos are probably the ones I've spent more time in, which is just south of the Sandias for you guys listening. And I feel like the Sandias, even at busy times, have actually been cleaner than the Manzanos in terms of the established trails. The Manzanos have a lot of it because they're not near as frequented as the Sandias, but similar mountain range, not as big, I don't think. But some of those trails that go back in there, sometimes they're just beat all to hell. And I think one of those things, maybe because of how it's harder to get there to a lot of those trails, where the Sandias, they're very public facing, and you get a lot of people out there, and you can see the pride because people
I
don't.
do think it's true that the trails in general are just very clean looking. It's not trash. I mean, I do think, I will pick up the random trash and so on. I think there's enough people that they just do that.
Yeah,
so
I even seen a guy with the doggy bags. I was proud of him. I was like, we're out in the wilderness and he's still cleaning it up, which I think is probably a law or something. But I just thought it was cool that we're out there, and I don't know. I would think that it's kind of okay to let your dog do his business in the trails, but he was picking it up. I was like, man, that's awesome.
Good for him.
Yeah.
and I hike a lot during the week, just an hour around the Elena Gallegos open space or something, and people that gets a lot of foot traffic with dogs, and people take bags to pick up after their dog.
I'm really glad to hear that. I was curious if you were going to tell me that people giving a shit about the mountains had declined. That was my whole question about Albuquerque, and I think it's really cool to hear somebody that frequents it as much as you do to say that. In your opinion, it's being treated more or less with decent amount of respect, because that's really cool. It's really big. You know what I mean? I think that's something that I would like to get across in this podcast is, there's a lot of stuff to explore in New Mexico. And even if you just want to take it easy, Albuquerque has all those Sandias, and Mike's got this awesome book, and to be able to go out there and check it out, I think as long as you're taking care of it, it should be able to last where my kids are out there doing their thing when they grow up. You know what I mean? Because my main thing that I like to go see is the Domingo Baca, because it has the plane crash from the 1950s. For you guys that don't know that, there was a plane that crashed in the 50s, and they left a large portion of the wreckage out there. I'm sure there was more that's been pilfered over the years, but it's sad. I think 16 people lost their lives, but it was something that it happened so long ago to now there's a trail that leads to the crash, and it's a very unique experience because you actually see the wreckage, the plane, and there's a few seats, there's some wheels and stuff like that. What do you think of that?
I write about that in the trail and what you encounter up there in the book, and my take on it is it's a very sobering to be up there.
It is,
and I say, treat it with the respect that it deserves, but it's a thing. I mean, it did happen.
Yeah.
And it's a challenging and memorable hike.
For sure. I saw a girl out there. We were out this last time, and they showed up, and she's jumping on the wing taking Instagram pictures, and I was like, and I'm pointing at her with my kids. I said, if I ever see you disrespect a place like this. No, it really is sad. They have a plaque up there. It's something really worth checking out. It's only 4 miles one way and then 4 miles back. And then, you could do a good little little day hike.
Near the beginning of our conversation, I said something about the most difficult hikes, and that's one of the 3 that I include. And that's a perfect example of, it's challenging. But also you don't want to get lost up there.
Right. There are some switch offs. I have a buddy I go with, and I've almost gone the wrong way a couple times. And to speak to to how hard it is, it's definitely a challenge because it's not really like a preset trail. This was a trail made to get to the wreckage, so it's where the wreckage is, which is kind of between a couple stout rock walls. And then, so when you get up into that area, it could be a little bit complicated because you're kind of scrambling up a couple little rocks. It's not super hard, but my 4-year-old could make it, my now 5-year-old. So I know that, for you guys listening, definitely one to take on. Very interesting.
And I would say over the years, it's gotten a lot more well-marked than it used to be.
Yeah. Well, we went when it was snowing one time, and I could only see half of it. And I was like, man, I can't believe that you can still, there's so much plane wreckage that you can still see a good chunk of it, even with, I think there was a 4-foot snowdrift up there. So that's cool. So we've talked a lot about your history and stuff like that. We've talked about your achievements. Do you have anything that you would want to tell an aspiring scientist, somebody that's doing stuff like that? Do you have some sort of advice for them?
I'll answer a slightly different question.
Okay.
I work with younger people at my church as a volunteer, and almost every good event we've kind of described in this podcast, somebody asked me out of the blue to write a book, and is many times in my life somebody has suggested I do something. Mike, we think you'd be good. Would you like to try doing this? And I go, what in the world are you even talking about?
How do you think I'm qualified to do it?
And I'm mystified, and I tell people I always said yes. I always said yes. And it just changed my life. I mean, I could never have predicted that I was going to write a textbook or write this book, the hiking book.
Or come on a podcast.
Yeah. Sure. Well, just all sorts of things. And that I wrote down this quote, which I'd heard several times recently. I'm not that much of a scholar, but I just know this off the top of my head. It says, luck is where opportunity meets preparation. If you Google that, most people think that comes from Oprah, which she did say that.
That's
but
okay.
It actually came from a Roman philosopher named Seneca back in the 50 AD.
That was the perfect answer to that question, Mike. I told you to know that. So always say yes. Always be up for challenges and taking on challenges.
And to see if I could do it. And it's like, but yeah, it just leads to all sorts of things.
That's awesome. Well, apparently, man. I mean, you've lived an awesome life. So then you're retired. You've written the book. You're hiking 2 or 3 times a week. I guess the only thing we haven't talked about is what is in store for you in the future. Like, what's your next step? Do you have anything in the works, or are you just kind of cruising, enjoying that retirement situation?
Mostly, I'm cruising and enjoying. I do a little bit of consulting these days in the area that I had worked in Sandias.
Sure.
Extensions or what I did back then. And part of it is just I've been around for so long. It's just like, okay, here's my perspective on what would be a good thing to try. Or,
sure.
An explanation of how things might have worked. So I don't have big plans specifically. And actually, when I retired, the standard question everybody asks you is, well, gee, what's your plans for when you retire? And I literally had no plans on purpose. Is I really wanted to see what was going to come along.
Sure.
And I got certain consulting gigs and this, that, and the other. But really, I didn't want to lock myself into something on day one that was going to prohibit me from doing something else that I never thought that I would be doing.
That's interesting.
So I have the freedom to do what I want.
Yeah,
and
like an open mind.
Things are going well.
That's awesome. Well, it looks like you're in good health. It looks like you're enjoying yourself, and you're still getting out there, man. Is there anything else you can think of that you wanted to tell our listeners? Maybe something we did talk about. You had your excellent quote. If you were to give a new hiker, somebody that wants to be a hiker, what's the one piece of advice that you could tell them? I always go back to when people ask me about backpacking, I say creature comforts. You have no idea how much a tube of chapstick will do for you when you're in the wilderness for 3 days, right? Or we got my most recent add-on. If somebody was going to ask me right now what my current best advice is, if you're going on a backpacking trip, do not underestimate one of those bag showers that you just take some lake water and, like when you're 2 days in and you're able to just rinse off your head and you're in your face with one of those things. I couldn't believe how much that made the game. It just changed the game for me, nice and fresh. You've done all your hiking. What would you say?
I don't have quite that specific advice. My advice on hiking would be pick a trail that my book or you've heard is modest in difficulty, and give it a try. And if you
challenge yourself, right?
But if you think, gee, Coltrin said this is modest, and it just kicked my butt, okay, now then go try an easy one.
Yeah.
And that is a difficulty in rating trails. Is for myself, I'm not going to do a 1 to 10.
Yeah. Well, it's subjective.
Yeah, it is subjective.
Sure.
And so just sort of get the hang of what. Okay. And I do tell you how long it is, how elevation and whatnot. Just start, and just see what you like, and
have fun,
and then add on to it. Also, I guess my advice is be prepared. It's that is the classic Boy Scout motto.
I guess chapstick would probably be a bad example of something that you're prepared with. That's a creature comfort, just for you guys listening. Water, food, hat.
and know where you're going.
Yeah. Tell somebody you're going as well. If you go by yourself, please tell somebody, because that's something I had tried that one time on my first backpacking trip in like 2010. And we decided to go to the top of the mountain, and we had one cell phone. And the cell phone was supposed to be the plan to turn it on and call somebody to come pick us up at one of these points. It was the worst plan ever. We lost the cell phone. We ran out of water, and we were at the top of the Manzanos where there is no water. And we just decided to take off from the peak on a no trail and slid down the side of the mountain until we found snow, melted that, filtered that, and drank it. And I want to tell you about 1,000 other small stories from that trip, but I learned a lot of lessons. So that, Mike, that is the best advice. I think I'm going to go back. I'm going to sell that on this podcast, is be prepared.
Well, it's like you and I have both made, I always think I've made every mistake possible that you learn from them. And
they are horrible mistakes when you make them too.
I don't have the most hair on the top of my head, and so I have been out with no hat, and you only do that once or twice, you know. And,
you feel every bit of that the next day.
And so, but it's also more fun if you don't make those mistakes, but you you thought it through.
Yeah. Well, I think one day I decided to go without a hat because I had a couple beers. We'd hike them up, and I'm fishing all day, you know. And I only had a couple beers, and I'm fishing. Don't realize it till I get back to the tent that I'm like glowing red because it was so burned. So that's awesome. Okay. Well, man. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you coming out here and being the first guest on People Pursuing Greatness.
I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun for me.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, Mike. Alrighty, man. If you want to get a hold of Mike's book, I would say to support, local UNM Press, go to unmpress.com, or you guys can check out Amazon. Sandia Mountain Hiking Guide by Mike Coltrin. And then if you're feeling like you need some challenging text to read, and I would think that most of you guys, because I sure wouldn't probably pick this thing up to read it, because I flipped through it just now, and there's a bunch of formulas and stuff like that.
There's about 2,500 equations.
Whew, man, I don't even know if I could do an equation. It's been too long. But what was it called again?
Chemically reacting flow.
So if any of you guys are chemistry majors and you happen to find that, it's definitely a cool little thing to know that there's a podcast with the man himself, and learn a little bit about semiconductors. It's definitely something I'm going to start doing some Googling on. So cool, man. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, man.